The stars looked different when Captain Jake Morrison woke up that morning. After 3 years of traveling through empty space, his ship's sensors had finally picked up something new. Alien signals were coming from the star system ahead of them. The New Frontier, humanity's first colony ship to leave Earth's solar system, was about to make first contact. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship and watched. The screens showed dozens of alien vessels moving between the planets. Some were huge, bigger than any human ship ever built. Others were small and fast, darting around like metal fish in an ocean of stars. The radio waves coming from the system were full of alien voices speaking in languages no human had ever heard. "Captain, we're getting a transmission," said Lisa Park, the ship's chief engineer. She was a small woman with quick hands and a mind that could solve any technical problem. "It's being sent on all frequencies. The computer says it's some kind of automatic message." Jake nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The alien who appeared on their screen was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. It wore a uniform covered in symbols that meant nothing to humans. When it spoke, the ship's computer tried to translate the words into English. "Greetings, unknown vessel. You have entered space controlled by the Galactic Council. All ships must follow the Universal Technology Prohibition Act. You must stop your ship and allow inspection of all weapons and military technology. Any ship carrying banned technology will be forced to leave Council space immediately." The message, repeated 3 times before cutting off. Jake looked at his senior officers, who had gathered on the bridge. Lisa Park was frowning at her computer screens. Troy Baker, the ship's Marine commander, was checking his sidearm out of habit. The man was built like a tank and had the attitude to match. "What do you think they mean by banned technology?" asked Lisa. Jake pulled up the ship's weapon systems on his screen. The New Frontier carried railguns that could shoot metal slugs at incredible speeds. It had missile tubes loaded with conventional explosives. The ship's defense system included kinetic weapons that could drop heavy objects from orbit onto planetary targets. All of this technology had been developed by humans over 2 centuries of warfare and engineering. "Send a response," Jake said. "Tell them we're peaceful explorers from Earth. Ask them to explain what technology is banned." The response came back within an hour. This time, the alien on the screen looked more official. Its uniform had more symbols, and it spoke with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zixthara of the Zirithi Empire. The Universal Technology Prohibition Act bans all advanced military technology. This includes energy weapons, plasma systems, quantum-based armaments, antimatter devices, and any weapon system that uses exotic matter or advanced physics beyond basic electromagnetic principles." The Admiral continued reading from what seemed like a very long list. "Chemical explosives above certain yield limits are banned. Directed energy weapons are banned. Any system that can cause mass destruction through advanced technology is banned. These laws have kept peace in the galaxy for 30 years. When the transmission ended, the bridge was quiet for a long moment. Troy Baker was the first to speak. "Captain, they didn't mention railguns. They didn't mention kinetic weapons or conventional missiles." Lisa was already running through the ship's technical specifications. "According to their definition, most of our weapons aren't advanced technology. Railguns use basic electromagnetic principles. Our missiles use chemical propulsion. Kinetic weapons just drop heavy things using gravity." Jake felt a slow smile spreading across his face. Humans had spent centuries fighting wars with gunpowder, metal bullets, and explosives. When they finally reached the stars, they had simply made bigger and faster versions of the same basic weapons. While other species had apparently moved on to exotic energy weapons, humans had perfected the art of throwing rocks really, really hard. "So we're in compliance with their laws?" Jake asked. Technically, yes, Lisa said. Our weapons are primitive by their standards. They probably think we're no threat to anyone. 3 days later, the Zirathi inspection fleet arrived. Admiral Zixthara brought 5 ships, each one sleek and obviously advanced. They moved without any visible propulsion, probably using some kind of gravity manipulation that humans could. Only dream about Jake met the aliens in the New Frontier's main hangar. Admiral Zixthara was even taller in person, nearly 7 feet of gray skin and nervous energy. The alien's translator device made its voice sound mechanical and flat. Captain Morrison, we will now inspect your vessel for banned technology. This is standard procedure for all species entering Council space. The inspection took 6 hours. The Zirathi brought scanning devices that hummed and beeped as they examined every weapon system on the ship. They spent a long time looking at the railgun batteries, scanning them with devices that glowed blue and purple. These are magnetic acceleration systems, one of the inspectors reported to the Admiral. They use electromagnetic fields to propel metal projectiles. The technology falls under basic physics exemptions in the treaty. The aliens were equally puzzled by the missile systems. Chemical propulsion, another inspector said. Conventional. Explosive warheads. No exotic matter detected. These systems are classified as primitive under Council standards. Admiral Zixthara examined the kinetic bombardment system personally. These were Jake's favorite weapons, simple but devastating. They were basically just heavy metal rods that could be dropped from orbit. Gravity did all the work, and the impact could level a city block. Gravity-assisted projectile deployment, the Admiral said finally. No advanced technology detected. These systems are permitted under the basic physics exemption. When the inspection was over, Admiral Zixthara stood in the hangar looking confused and slightly annoyed. It was clear that the alien had expected to find something worth confiscating. Captain Morrison, your vessel is in technical compliance. With the Universal Technology Prohibition Act, you are granted provisional access to Council space. However, be aware that any aggressive action against Council members will result in immediate expulsion. After the Zirathi ships left, Jake gathered his senior staff in the conference room. Troy Baker was grinning like he had just won the lottery. Captain, I don't think they understand what our weapons can actually do, Troy said. They see primitive technology and assume it's not dangerous. Lisa was already running calculations on her computer. A railgun slug moving at 10% of light speed has more kinetic energy than most energy weapons. Our kinetic bombardment system can hit harder than anything short of a nuclear weapon. Jake looked out at the alien ships moving through the star system ahead of them. The Galactic Council had banned advanced technology to keep peace, but they had made one critical mistake. They had forgotten that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not advanced technology. It was intelligent beings who refused to give up. Humans had arrived in a galaxy that tried to ban the tools of war. What the aliens didn't understand was that humans had never needed permission to be dangerous. They just needed the opportunity to prove it. 3 weeks after the inspection, the New Frontier docked at Harmony Station, the largest trading post in the outer rim of Council space. Jake Morrison had never seen anything like it. The station was a massive wheel spinning slowly in space, with ships from dozens of different species coming and going like busy insects around a hive. The docking bay was full of aliens Jake had only seen in the Council's information files. There were the bird-like Altarians with their bright feathers and musical voices. The insect-looking Vorthic moved in groups, always staying close to each other. The Krellians looked like walking tanks, covered in natural armor that made them seem invincible. But Jake noticed something interesting as he walked through the station. None of these aliens carried weapons. The Krellians, who looked like they were born for war, had nothing more dangerous than eating utensils. The Altarians, whose files said they were once fierce warriors, carried only communication devices. Even the station security forces used nothing but stun weapons that could barely knock someone unconscious. "This is weird," Troy Baker said as they walked through the main market area. "I've never seen a space station without real weapons." Back home, even cargo haulers carry at least a few guns. Lisa Park was busy scanning everything with her portable computer. The technology ban really changed how these species think about conflict. They've been without real weapons for 30 years. Most of them probably don't even remember what war looks like. They found a bar called the Neutral Zone, where aliens from different species sat together drinking strange liquids and talking in the universal trade language. Jake ordered something that looked like water but tasted like metal, and listened to the conversations around him. A group of Altarian traders were complaining about pirate attacks in the outer systems. "The Council peacekeepers are too slow," one of them chirped. "By the time they arrive, the pirates have already taken everything and disappeared." At another table, two Krellian merchants were discussing a territorial dispute with the Khazari. "Hegemony. They take our mining rights and we can do nothing," one of them growled. "The Council says we must negotiate, but the Khazari only understand strength." Jake exchanged glances with his officers. It was becoming clear that the Universal Technology Prohibition Act had created as many problems as it had solved. Without the ability to defend themselves, smaller species were vulnerable to anyone willing to break the rules. The next morning, Jake received a visit from Station Commander Veltar, an elderly Zirathi who had been running Harmony Station for 15 years. The alien's gray skin was marked with age lines, and its large black eyes seemed tired. "Captain Morrison, I must speak with you about your weapons," Veltar said through its translator. "There have been complaints." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Complaints?" "We passed your inspection. Admiral Zixthara confirmed that our technology is in compliance with Council law." "Yes, technically you are correct. But some species are concerned about the precedent you set. They worry that other newcomers might follow your example and find ways around the technology ban." Lisa leaned forward in her chair. "Commander, with respect, we didn't find ways around anything. We simply used different technology than what your laws were designed to control. Our weapons are based on principles that have been understood for thousands of years." Veltar's translator made a sound. That might have been a sigh. "That is exactly the problem. Your weapons are primitive, but they are also effective. This combination troubles many council members." Over the next few days, Jake learned more about how the technology ban had shaped galactic society. The larger species like the Zirathi had given up their most advanced weapons, but they still maintained significant advantages through their superior technology in other areas. They had faster ships, better shields, and more sophisticated manufacturing capabilities. The smaller species had been forced to give up everything. They relied entirely on Council peacekeepers for protection, and the peacekeepers were controlled by the larger species. It was a system that maintained peace by ensuring that the strong remained strong and the weak remained weak. But humans didn't fit into this system. They were new, so they weren't bound by 30 years of gradual disarmament. Their technology was primitive enough to be legal, but advanced enough to be dangerous. Most importantly, they understood warfare in ways that other species had forgotten. "We're making them nervous," Troy observed one evening as they shared dinner in the station's human-friendly restaurant. "They spent 3 decades building a system where only they have real power. Now we show up with weapons that actually work, and everyone is asking questions." The questions became more direct when a delegation of Altarian traders approached. Jake in the market. Their leader, a female named Kiresh, spoke in careful, precise English. "Captain Morrison, we have heard that your species uses kinetic weapons. We would like to understand how these systems work." Jake looked around and noticed that other aliens were listening to the conversation. Word about human weapons had spread quickly through the station's gossip networks. "Our weapons are simple," Jake said carefully. "We accelerate solid objects to high speeds and let physics do the rest. Mass times velocity equals momentum. Basic physics." Kiresh's feathers ruffled with excitement. "And these weapons can penetrate modern shields?" "Energy shields are designed to deflect energy weapons," Lisa explained. "They're not very effective against solid objects moving at high speeds. It's like trying to stop a bullet with a flashlight." The Altarian traders exchanged glances that Jake didn't need a translator to understand. They were thinking about pirates and territorial disputes and all, the problems they couldn't solve with stun weapons and negotiation. That night, Jake was awakened by an emergency communication from Admiral Zixthara. The Zirathi leader appeared on his room's small screen, looking agitated. "Captain Morrison, you must stop discussing your weapons technology with other species. You are causing unrest among council members." Jake sat up in bed and tried to look diplomatic. "Admiral, we're not sharing weapons technology. We're just explaining basic physics. Any species with a decent education system should understand kinetic energy. Understanding the principles and applying them are different things," Zixthara replied. "Your presence has reminded other species that the technology ban has limitations. Some are beginning to question whether the current system is fair." After the Admiral signed off, Jake lay back down and stared at the ceiling. He was beginning to understand the real reason for the technology ban. It wasn't about preventing war. It was about preventing change. The major species had created a system that kept them in power, and they didn't want anyone rocking the boat. But humans had always been good at rocking boats. They had come to the galaxy with simple weapons and simple ideas about fairness. They didn't understand why some species should be strong while others remained weak. Most importantly, they didn't care about preserving a system that they had never agreed to join. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A Khazari battle fleet had been spotted moving toward the human mining colony at Prosperity Base. The Khazari hegemony, one of the most aggressive species in council space, had apparently decided that the newcomers needed to be taught their place. In the Galactic Order, Jake stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonists were preparing to face an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. The Khazari had advanced shields, faster ships, and 3 decades of experience in post-ban warfare, but they had never fought humans before. They had never faced weapons that treated their advanced shields like tissue paper. Most importantly, they had never encountered a species that had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of turning simple physics into devastating warfare. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had never needed permission to be dangerous. The emergency message from Prosperity Base came through while Jake Morrison was still drinking his morning coffee. The voice of Colony Administrator Ben Walsh crackled through the communication system, filled with static and fear. "New frontier. This is Prosperity Base. We have 12 Khazari warships approaching our position. Repeat, 12 Khazari warships inbound. They're demanding our immediate surrender and evacuation. Request immediate assistance." Jake was already moving toward the bridge before the message finished. Lisa Park met him in the corridor, her arms full of technical equipment. Troy Baker was right behind her, checking his rifle and muttering under his breath about alien bullies. "How long until we reach Prosperity Base?" Jake asked as they reached the bridge. 6 hours at maximum speed, Lisa replied, her fingers flying over the navigation controls. "But Captain, we're just one ship. The Khazari have 12 warships, including at least 3 heavy cruisers." Jake studied the tactical display that showed the enemy fleet. The Khazari ships were impressive, each one larger than the new frontier, and bristling with what looked like advanced defensive systems. According to the ship's database, Khazari vessels were known for their powerful energy shields and superior maneuverability. Troy, what do we have for defense at Prosperity Base? Jake asked. Troy consulted his military files. 3 human frigates. The Liberty, the Independence, and the Victory. Each one carries standard railgun batteries and missile systems, plus whatever mining equipment the colonists can turn into weapons. The numbers didn't look good. 15 Khazari ships against 4 human vessels and a mining colony. But Jake had learned something important during his years in space. Numbers weren't everything. Sometimes, the side with better tactics won. Despite being outnumbered, the new frontier dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Prosperity system 4 hours later. The scene that greeted them was exactly what Jake had expected. The Khazari fleet hung in space like a school of metallic sharks, their weapons pointed at the small human colony on the planet's surface. Captain Troy Baker was already in command of the 3 frigates, having taken over as soon as the new frontier arrived. His voice came through the communication system with the calm confidence of a professional soldier. Captain Morrison, the Khazari commander, has given us 2 hours to evacuate the colony. He says he's claiming this system for the Khazari hegemony under the right of conquest. Jake opened a channel to the Khazari fleet. Khazari vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the human ship New Frontier. You are in violation of Council space regulations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response came back in heavily accented English. Human Captain, this is War Admiral Kethvor of the Khazari Second Fleet. Your people are weak and your weapons are primitive. You have 1 hour to evacuate before we destroy your colony. Jake looked at his tactical display. The Khazari ships were arranged in a standard attack formation, designed to maximize their energy weapons while protecting their command vessels. It was a formation that had probably worked well against other Council species armed with similar technology. But the Khazari had made one critical mistake. They were fighting the last war, not the current one. Troy, are your ships ready? Jake asked over the private military channel. Locked and loaded, Captain. The boys are eager to show these lizards what human weapons can do. The battle began. Exactly 1 hour later, when War Admiral Kethver lost patience with human delays. The Khazari fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their energy shields glowing bright blue as they powered up their weapon systems. What happened next would be talked about in Council space for years to come. The human ships scattered like leaves in a windstorm, abandoning all standard formation tactics. The Liberty dove toward the planet's gravity, while the Independence shot straight up toward the system's asteroid belt. The Victory and New Frontier split in opposite directions, moving in patterns that seemed completely random. The Khazari Admiral tried to follow standard fleet tactics, directing his ships to pursue and engage the scattered humans. But his energy weapons kept missing targets that refused to fly in straight lines. Worse, the human ships were using the planet's gravity and the asteroid field to change direction in ways that made targeting nearly impossible. The first Khazari ship died 3 minutes into the battle. The Liberty had used the planet's gravity to accelerate to incredible speed before firing its railguns at the Khazari cruiser Deathbringer. The metal slugs, moving at 10% of light speed, punched through the alien ship's energy shields like they weren't even there. Deathbringer exploded in a ball of fire and debris that took 2 escort ships with it. War Admiral Kethvar couldn't believe what he was seeing. His advanced shields, which could deflect plasma weapons and absorb energy blasts, were useless against simple metal projectiles. The human weapons were primitive, but they worked on principles his defenses weren't designed to handle. The second wave of destruction came from the Independence, which had positioned itself in the asteroid belt. Captain Amy Rodriguez used the floating rocks as cover while her ship launched a swarm of missiles at the Khazari formation. The missiles weren't sophisticated by Council standards, but they didn't need to be. Chemical explosives worked just as well in space as they did on planetary surfaces. 4 more Khazari ships disappeared in expanding clouds of flame and metal. The Khazari tried to regroup, but the human ships wouldn't stay still long enough for a proper engagement. They used hit-and-run tactics, appearing just long enough to fire their weapons before disappearing behind planets, asteroids, or the system star. The victory scored the most dramatic kill when Captain Steve Murphy used his ship's kinetic bombardment system against the Khazari flagship. The heavy metal rod, dropped from high orbit and accelerated by the planet's gravity, hit the enemy ship at over 50,000 miles per hour. The impact was visible from space as a brilliant flash that left nothing but glowing debris. War Admiral Kethfor found himself commanding only 4 ships out of his original 12. His formation was broken, his crews were demoralized, and his weapons were useless against enemies that refused to fight according to established rules. Human ships, this is War Admiral Kethfor. We propose a ceasefire to discuss terms of engagement. Jake's response was broadcast on all frequencies, so the entire Khazari fleet could hear it. War Admiral, the terms are simple. Leave this system immediately and never return. You have 10 minutes to comply. The remaining Khazari ships were gone in 8 minutes. News of the battle spread through Council space faster than light speed. Communication systems could carry it. The impossible had happened. A species with primitive weapons had defeated one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. At Harmony Station, Commander Veltar received reports that made the elderly Zirathi question everything the Council had built over the past 30 years. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had proven that the technology ban had created a false sense of security among the galaxy's major powers. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Frontier and watched the last Khazari ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. Around him, his crew was celebrating their victory, but Jake wasn't thinking about the battle. He was thinking about what would happen next. The galaxy had just learned that humans didn't need advanced technology to be dangerous. They just needed the willingness to fight dirty, think creatively, and remember that sometimes the oldest weapons were still the best weapons. The age of Council supremacy was ending. The age of human warfare was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called within 48 hours of the Khazari defeat. Representatives from every major species gathered at the Council headquarters on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, the Great Assembly Hall, which had witnessed 30 years of peaceful debate, now buzzed with angry voices and fearful whispers. Admiral Zixthara stood before the assembled delegates, the holographic displays behind him showing the wreckage of the Khazari fleet. Pieces of destroyed ships still floated in space around Prosperity Base, silent testimony to the power of human weapons. Honorable delegates, the Zirathi Admiral began, we face a crisis that threatens the foundation of galactic peace. The humans have demonstrated that the Universal Technology Prohibition Act has dangerous loopholes. Their primitive weapons have proven capable of defeating advanced Council military forces. The Altarian representative, Speaker Thyranus, raised her feathered hand. Admiral Zixthara, with respect, the humans did not violate any Council laws. They used weapons that were specifically exempted from the technology ban. The failure is not theirs, but ours. Angry voices filled the hall. The Krellian delegate pounded his armored fist on the table. The humans made a mockery of our defenses. War Admiral Kethfor was one of our finest commanders, and they crushed him like he was a child. From the observation gallery, Captain Jake Morrison watched the debate with interest. He had been invited to attend as a witness, though he wasn't allowed to speak unless directly questioned. Beside him sat Lisa Park and Troy Baker, both of them taking notes on everything they heard. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates demanded that human weapons be immediately reclassified as advanced technology. Others argued that changing the laws retroactively would set a dangerous precedent. A few brave voices suggested that maybe the entire technology ban needed to be reconsidered. It was the representative from the Vorthic Collective who asked the question that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted a voice. Speaker, what happens when other species learn to build kinetic weapons? What happens when the technology ban becomes meaningless? The hall fell silent. For 30 years, the major species had maintained peace by ensuring that only they possessed truly dangerous weapons. Now the humans had proven that devastating warfare was possible using technology that any species could develop. Admiral Zixthara activated another holographic display. Intelligence reports indicate that several species have already begun researching human weapon designs. The Altarians have started experiments with electromagnetic acceleration. The Vorthic are investigating chemical propulsion systems. Even some Krellian engineers are studying kinetic bombardment techniques. Jake felt a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The galaxy was learning the lesson that humans had figured out centuries ago. You didn't need exotic physics to hurt your enemies. You just needed to be creative with the tools you had. The Zirathi High Chancellor, an ancient alien whose gray skin was marked with the ceremonial scars of high office, stood slowly from the central podium. The hall fell silent, out of respect for the old leader. Delegates, we must face the truth. The technology ban has failed, not because it was violated, but because it was incomplete. We banned advanced weapons while allowing the knowledge that makes all weapons possible. The Chancellor gestured toward the human observation gallery. Captain Morrison, please join us on the floor. It is time we heard from the species that has changed everything. Jake walked down to the speaker's podium, aware that hundreds of alien eyes were watching his every move. The translation devices around the hall hummed as they prepared to carry his words to dozens of different species. Honorable delegates, Jake began, I want to be clear about something. Humans didn't come here to start a war or break your laws. We came here to find a place in the galaxy, and we followed your rules exactly as they were written. He paused and looked around the hall. But we've learned something disturbing during our time in council space. Your technology ban wasn't really about preventing war. It was about preventing change. The major species kept their advantages while forcing smaller species to remain defenseless. The Krellian delegates stood up angrily. Human, you know nothing about our history. The technology ban prevented the galaxy from destroying itself. Jake nodded respectfully. You're right. I don't know your history, but I know what I've seen. I've watched Altarian traders lose their cargo to pirates because they can't defend themselves. I've seen Vorthic colonies forced to accept unfair treaties because they have no military strength. Your peace came at the cost of justice. Lisa Park had provided Jake with detailed analysis of council politics, and he used that information now. The current system works for the Zirathi, the Khazari, and the other major powers. But it doesn't work for the species who gave up everything and got nothing in return. The hall erupted in angry voices. Some delegates shouted support for Jake's words, while others demanded that he be removed for insulting the council. The High Chancellor called for order, but it took several minutes for the noise to die down. When quiet returned, Jake continued his speech. Humans have a saying, peace through strength. Real peace doesn't come from making everyone weak. It comes from making everyone strong enough to defend themselves, but smart enough to choose cooperation over conflict. He gestured toward the holographic displays, still showing the Khazari battle. War Admiral Kethvor attacked human civilians because he thought we were too weak to fight back. He was wrong, and now his fleet is scrap metal. But the real problem isn't that we won. The real problem is that he felt safe making that attack in the first place. The Altarian speaker stood and addressed the hall. The human speaks truth. For 30 years, we have lived in fear of species like the Khazari, because we gave up our ability to defend ourselves. We trusted the Council to protect us, but the Council cannot be everywhere at once. Over the next 3 days, the debate continued. Jake found himself speaking several more times, explaining human military philosophy and answering questions about kinetic weapons. He was careful to avoid giving detailed technical specifications, but he made it clear that any species with basic industrial capability could build effective weapons using human principles. The breakthrough came when the Khazari representative arrived at the council chambers. War Admiral Kethfor himself stood before the assembly, his pride clearly wounded, but his message clear. Honorable delegates, the Khazari hegemony formally withdraws from the Universal Technology Prohibition Act. We will not remain defenseless. While other species possess superior weapons, we intend to develop our own kinetic weapon systems immediately. The dam burst. Within hours, representatives from a dozen species had announced their intention to withdraw from the technology ban. The smaller species wanted to build weapons to defend themselves. The larger species wanted to maintain their military advantages. The careful balance that had maintained peace for 30 years crumbled in a single afternoon. High Chancellor Velnoth called for a final vote on the future of the technology ban. The choices were simple. Extend the ban to cover all weapons technology, including the systems still possessed by major species, or abandon the ban entirely and allow unrestricted military development. The vote wasn't even close. By a margin of 3-1, the council chose to abandon the technology ban. Jake stood in the observation gallery and watched history being made. The galaxy was about to enter a new age of military competition, and humans had been the catalyst for that change. But he didn't feel guilty about it. The old system had been built on inequality and maintained through fear. The new system would be built on the principle that every species had the right to defend itself. Admiral Zixthara approached Jake after the final vote. The Zirathi leader looked tired and defeated, but there was something like respect in its large black eyes. Captain Morrison, you have changed the galaxy forever. I hope you understand the responsibility that comes with that change. Jake nodded solemnly. Admiral, humans have been dealing with that responsibility for a long time. We've learned that freedom is always dangerous, but it's better than the alternative. Maybe it's time for the rest of the galaxy to learn that lesson too. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of the new frontier and watched human ships training with Altarian vessels in joint military exercises. The galaxy had not fallen into chaos as some had predicted. Instead, it had begun to find a new balance based on mutual respect rather than enforced weakness. The age of council supremacy was over. The age of galactic democracy had begun. And humans, who had arrived as unwelcome outsiders, had become the teachers of a new way of thinking about peace, strength, and the right of every species to determine its own destiny. The stars looked different now. They looked like freedom.